I was like kind of in my K-pop phase when I lived in Korea, and then I went to Texas, and you know, I had my bangs dyed blonde, and
Yeah.
very K-pop style, but it didn't really fit in Texas.
The 2024 Oscars race is in full swing, and we are chatting with the actors, creators, and more right here on The Awardist. Hi, everyone. I'm Jared Hall, Entertainment Weekly Executive Editor. Charles Melton is best known for his work on the CW's Riverdale, which wrapped up its 7-season run just a few months ago in August 2023. But his work in Todd Haynes' latest movie, May December, could not be more different, playing Joe Yoo, husband of Julianne Moore's Gracie. The two struck up a relationship when Joe was just 13 years old. She went to prison. Their relationship continued when she was released. They married and had 3 kids. And now a movie is being made about them. And actress Elizabeth Berry, played by Natalie Portman, is coming to visit and observe their life as she prepares to play Gracie. In the process, Joe starts to question everything he has swept under the rug about his relationship with his wife. Melton has already earned numerous accolades and awards nominations for his work, and Oscar buzz is strong. We go in depth about all of that recognition, his devastating performance, and working with Oscar winners Portman and more. Here now is that interview. Well, first of all, Charles Melton, thanks for your time and thanks for joining me on The Awardist. Very deserving of being here because your work here in May December is just so fantastic, and congrats on the many nominations and wins you are already racking up.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, what of the past? I mean, really, it feels like it's kind of been a lot in the last 3 to 4 weeks or so. Is that kind of how it's felt to you?
Yeah, it's kind of been nonstop. I mean, but it's amazing that there's been such a positive response to May December. I mean, who would have thought this, that over a year ago when we wrapped up filming 23 Days in Savannah, Georgia on a very small budget.
Yeah.
With a short amount of time that, we would be here talking with you.
Yeah. Well, congrats on it. Correct me if my information here is wrong, but my understanding, you're originally from Alaska. Your family then moved to Kansas. You played college football there. How and when did the acting bug bite?
You missed a lot in between. So my dad
there was a lot in between, yeah. But so that's the short of it, though.
Yeah, kind of the short of it. I spent the most time when I lived in Korea for 5 years, in Germany
got it. Okay.
4 years. I lived in Germany for 4 years up until I was 15. And then I spent 2 years in Texas, born in Juneau, Alaska, every summer in Juneau, Alaska, from wherever we were stationed in the world, because my dad was in the Army. And then my sophomore year in high school, we moved to Kansas, went to high school, graduated, played football there. And I think, one thing that I had that I did with my family and my dad all the time was watch movies. We watched movies all the time. And we have a library of VHS tapes and DVDs, like a massive library. And it was, doing that and constantly moving from one place to the next, assimilating, adapting, evolving. I was like kind of in my K-pop phase when I lived in Korea, and then I went to Texas, and I had my bangs dyed blonde, and very K-pop style, but it didn't really fit in Texas. So I think so
it was almost like you were kind of finding, not necessarily playing characters wherever you went, but there were new evolutions of Charles everywhere you went.
For sure. There's certain kind of mannerisms or things that you kind of adapt to in order to maybe fit in a way.
Yeah.
And I think that just like formed maybe this sense of like wanting to not so much like disappear, but to like play characters.
Yeah. Tell other people's stories and become other people. It makes complete sense to me.
Yeah.
When you initially auditioned for May, December, did you already know that Natalie Portman and Julianne Moore were part of this? Oh, you
Oh,
knew. So that's adding all kinds of like want and desire and hope to land this role.
yeah. I was when I got the self tape, or the request, the audition, I was like, oh, Natalie Portman, Julianne Moore, directed by Todd Haynes. Okay, what do I have to lose? But no, Sammy's script, Sammy Birch's script, there was so much. It was just this beautiful, just blueprint for these complex characters. It was so subtle, and I was really finding many parallels in these instinctive connections to who Joe was. There's just something that was so attractive about just Joe's experience in this sense of repression and loneliness. And, then I just, after having that kind of instinctive reaction, did the reverse engineering in preparation. But then, you know, that was kind of like a 6-week process of me just really working like I've never worked before, and sending in the tape that led to me meeting Julie and Todd for a chemistry read in New York.
Okay, so how do you, and maybe you're not a person who gets nervous anyway, but how do you, when you know you're meeting her, you're going to be standing with her, or even if it's Zoom, like how do you wash those nerves away and just zero in and focus on
Oh
the
my
task
gosh, are
at
you
hand?
kidding? Are you kidding?
They didn't wash off.
No, I think it was more so excitement than anything.
Yeah.
And this is going to be the most stereotypical answer. You just breathe. I remember standing outside of that audition door in New York, and I heard Todd and Julie talking about the scene. So I assumed, okay, I think I may be the first one going in. My heart's beating out of my chest. The light from the other side of the door, with where Julianne and Todd were at, it's creeping through the cracks of the door. I'm trying to convince myself not to go in. I go in. Julie's wearing all white. Todd's there in a white t-shirt. The light is bright. And I'm covering my eyes. And then I completely blacked out and I walked out of the room. And I was like, I don't know what happened, but that was the highlight of just this whole experience.
That's a moment.
And that's a moment. Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, yeah, you say you blacked out, but it worked out in your favor. Have you talked to Todd or Julie about that audition? Like, what was it? Like, what did I do? Anything like that?
Yeah, we've talked, Todd, they say so many sweet things. I mean, it was really a great experience, that it was very magical, so collaborative. And Julie, she's first generation on her mom's side. She was an army brat. She spent some time in Germany. She spent some time in Juneau, Alaska, where I was born. So there's a lot of connective tissue kind of going in. But it just, and Todd, Todd would say these things like, you showed me who Joe was. What you did with your tape and just everything. And, you showed me who this man was, like the past, the present, and the future. And he said something like that. He says it a lot more eloquently, but he says that. And then and when you have someone that's saying that, like Todd Haynes, the genius of Todd Haynes, while encouraging you to lean into your instincts and trust in your instincts, I mean, everything kind of becomes limitless, and it's a little bit empowering to just really like let go on set.
Yeah. Well, okay. So speaking of, you showed him what Joe was. I mean, Joe is so interesting because he's a child in a man's body. But also raising 3 kids. He's raised 3 kids. He was, manipulated and taken advantage of as a teenager. And he certainly has some, unresolved feelings about everything that happened with Gracie starting when he was 13 years old. Yeah. So in the midst of all of that, what did you understand best about him?
I think repression, hiding. immense responsibility. There's like many things. It's really complex, but in terms of the responsibility, I mean, Joe, there's this arrested development there. His adolescence was taken from him, and he didn't really get to quite experience that because he had the responsibility of caretaking for a kid, his kid. So it just really made me dive into this experience of responsibility that I've had, which is different than Joe, but maybe the feeling could be similar. And that's me being this army brat, right?
Mm.
I have two younger sisters, and this is just like a part of the process, I think. Like if there's something that makes sense of my own life, maybe I can use it allows me to be a little bit more empathetic and understanding that maybe the character. So like when I was 11, we were stationed in Germany. My dad was, and my dad's been in the army for like 26 plus years. And, he sat me down the day before he went off to go away for a year in Desert Storm. And he sat me down. He's my hero. And he gave me this inspirational talk about responsibility, taking care of my two younger sisters, taking care of my mom, and like honor and all these things. I'm a little kid, but at the same time, like this responsibility that I took upon myself because I wanted to make my dad proud. And I will do anything for my sisters and my mother. So in a way, I was putting on a shoe at that age that was maybe a little too big for me, knowing that I would grow into it. And that's what we kind of see Joe does. He does all like, when it comes to like these roles that he really takes on with, this resilience as far as like being a provider, a loving father who cares about his kids, a loving husband. Like he's completely disregarding himself. He is codependent by nature and putting everything before him. His family comes first. His kids comes first. All the cakes that Gracie doesn't sell, he eats.
Yeah.
He's the one to, go to someone's house and eat second, third, fourth, fifth plates of servings in order to make the other person feel better about themselves on some sort of level than him. So everything's in spite or not
in service of others.
In service others, which is heartbreaking, but like it's like, this is so beautiful, but it's heartbreaking. Like, come on. And that's why I think it's so, to have that moment in the scene where, Todd does it so brilliantly where we're looking, where the characters are looking down the barrel of the camera, but it's not, they're looking at their own reflection. And it's the first time we see Joe see himself, I think. The first time before he acknowledges this question to Gracie in the bedroom scene, which is not an accusation. It's not pointing a finger. It's just asking the question.
Right.
What if I was too young? And then he's gaslit and manipulated. And you're just like, oh my gosh, will Joe ever get a break? And the next morning he's making pancakes for his kids before they graduate.
Yeah. And what's interesting too there is because I think that the kids clearly have a very different relationship with mom and dad.
Sure.
And they, I think, gravitate more toward liking their dad, but there's also that underlying level of feeling bad for him too. Like there's a little bit of like, I don't want to say pity. I don't know if it goes that far, but just right under the surface, they're like, man, like what a crappy situation for our dad, but we love the guy. He's our dad. And, he's taking care of us. So I think that love is really obvious too from them.
Yeah. I think we see Joe and, throughout the script, we see Joe and we see so many different versions of Joe, not just through whether it's like the TV version of Joe or the audition tapes of the kids of Joe, but like really his son, played by the super talented Gabriel Chung, just what he does. He is kind of like a mirror, I think, of Joe if Joe didn't have his adolescence really tainted at such a young age, and is more mature than Joe in some ways based off of certain experiences. But, and even just going off the tangent of Joe and these roles that he takes upon himself. Like when you think about being an X-ray technician, your job is to not diagnose, is to take the picture and pass it off.
Yeah.
And it's, maybe a little symbolic of Joe, who never really evaluates, just takes the picture, passes it off for someone else to diagnose.
Right.
He's never really looking at himself, really.
Yeah. Yeah. That's very interesting. You mentioned all of Grace's cakes that Joe eats, and even when he's with other people's homes. Todd has talked about. I want to get your take and potential clarification.
Yeah.
Did you gain the weight for this role? 40 pounds, is that right?
Yeah, close to 40 pounds. I did.
Wow.
Yes.
Was it a feeling like going for were you going for like a dad bod? What was the ultimate goal?
No, the ultimate goal was thinking of Joe, he's a suburban father of 3, right?
Yeah.
And diving into who he is, like I was telling you earlier, he's the guy to eat the second, third, fourth, fifth plate of servings at, the family friend's house in order to make them feel good about, what they cooked or whatnot. Like, he's eating the leftover cakes that Gracie doesn't sell. There's this fragility, but this overpowering quality that she has with Joe, where he's caretaking on so many different levels and very codependent, unhealthy levels, where she is like on this pedestal. But, it was more conversations too. That informed what Joe would feel like, and, conversations with Todd. He doesn't really, does he find comfort?
Mm-hmm.
And then maybe it was just a big excuse for me to eat whatever I wanted,
Hey, it was when that door opens.
And I think there's this sense of masculinity too, and I think I would assume that Joe was a former athlete at one time, and it just played into the whole story.
Yeah. And then there's also a bit of your just even the way you carry Joe's body. There's a bit of a like kind of slumped into himself, which I think kind of just even more illustrates that kind of deep down that perhaps depression that he feels, and the sadness in that. So those are all just like great choices, and I just think you did a fantastic job with all of that. You mentioned this was a quick shoot, 23 days, and I know there wasn't even a lot of prep time that you guys got in terms of rehearsals and stuff. Natalie has said that she didn't really get to observe Julianne in advance to know the mannerisms and her physicality that she was going to be bringing. What do you recall about the first time that you saw her become Gracie, and in turn, how you as Joe kind of absorbed and reacted to that?
It was really fascinating. Natalie talks about this in a few, I've heard her talk about this in a few, press things, but she, her character, she gets to observe Gracie. So Natalie Portman is playing an actress who's going to play an actress that's playing Julianne Moore's character, Gracie. So she gets to observe Gracie because it's going to inform her choices that she makes when she slowly becomes his character.
Yeah.
I'm envious because I didn't get to watch Julie and Natalie like that, because I had to focus on my character, because they're masters at their craft. They're so incredible. They're so much fun, but I'm a little, it'd be so incredible. We were collaborating together, but oh my gosh, Natalie just got to watch Julie and like take bits and pieces to, for her character, which was so cool. There wasn't that much prep time at all, but like, I think that's just a testament to Todd. He just elevated everything, and everyone was at the top of their game, and he was so decisive and has this point of view where it was just, all you had to worry about was your job and like aligning yourself to your character, and but we had so much fun. It was really this great, experience for those 23 days.
Yeah. There's so many great moments in this movie. And typically I feel like a lot of it is either like Julianne and Natalie together, or you and Natalie, or you and Julianne. It's just, a lot of kind of pairings. There is, of course, that one dinner scene, which is so great, where the son gets up and leaves as well. But I'm thinking specifically about in terms of with you and Natalie, you mentioned, him being an x-ray tech. And when she comes to observe him work, of course, there are ulterior motives there
Sure.
on the part of Elizabeth. But tell me a bit about, we've talked about Julianne in terms of Natalie and what what her specific goals were in those scenes for Elizabeth. Just the dynamic and the kind of, I don't know if it's a power play necessarily, but.
Oh, yeah. No. Yeah. I kind of feel maybe on some sort of way we're seeing Joe experience what he experienced with Gracie when he was 13, again, as a 36-year-old man with Elizabeth, trying to learn to portray Gracie. But, in that X-ray scene, that was my first scene, believe it or not. That was the first scene I ever shot.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
well, but let's get right into it. Yeah.
I've heard, Todd and Natalie and Julie, talk about, how these two very sure of themselves characters in Gracie and Elizabeth, like, use seduction as a form of power. And like Joe's not receptive to any of that. That's why I think it's so comedic. Because, in that scene, Elizabeth is throwing out all these signals and like flirting. And it's like, what? Like
he's kind of like, what?
And he's just kind of like, well, it's lunchtime now. Okay.
Lunchtime.
Okay. He doesn't know what's happening. It's so funny. But
Yeah, but that is so interesting because Elizabeth, what she's doing is, it's so gross to make him kind of go through that all over again. And no one, I think Gracie certainly gets hints of what she's, trying to do, but even like the full scope of it is, it's
pretty dark.
I'll use the word again. It's gross. Yeah, indeed. There has been much to do about a particular scene in this film. I know it wasn't your first time filming a sex scene, but I think safe to say this one was under very different circumstances than anything else you've done. What was important for you to convey in that moment?
That was our last day of filming. And there, in that bedroom scene, there's like 6 different scenes in that one whole scene. There's so many different beats, so many different moments. It was so respectful. Todd, myself, and Natalie, we had so many conversations about just how the scene would go. And, it was very professional. And it was obviously our last day of filming. It's a heartbreaking scene. I mean, when I was watching it, it's funny to see the audience respond to Joe jumping into bed, after he has sex with Elizabeth. Because he's kind of like giddy. He's like, okay, like,
yeah, he's giddy. Like it's
it's heartbreaking. It's like, oh gosh,
it's almost like there's like, there is another life out there, or something outside of the 4 walls of my home, and that's what's just like, no, Joe, that's not what it's about.
And then she leaves for a second, or he leaves for a second to go to the bathroom. She reads the note. And then a moment, he's like, what was this about? I thought you liked me. And she's like, well, this is what adults do. Then he leaves. And then she goes to read the letter. You're like, what?
Yeah.
It kind of just sucks the air out of you. It's
but it's a great scene. Yeah. It's such a great scene. 9 hours you wore that prosthetic?
More or less, yes.
That feels like a bit of torture, Charles.
It was very interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I can imagine, but important for the scene, I suppose. But that was your choice.
It was a collective choice, I think.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Fair enough. Todd has mentioned, well, I mean, of course, prior to this film, you're best known for starring on the CW's Riverdale, 91 episodes, I believe, of that.
Yes.
Congrats on a great run there. Todd has said he did not know your work from there. Was there something to you that was like almost refreshing about that? Because, people who are on shows for a long time become so synonymous with them that sometimes it's hard to be able to be seen as anything else.
Sure. Yeah. I think either way, whether Todd would have seen it or not, I think, he has this out of the box thinking, where he can see beyond maybe what's on a piece of paper of like what you've done in the past, and I was so grateful to be, if it wasn't for Riverdale, I would have never had the, the opportunity to self-tape for Todd Haynes and film with Todd Haynes. I mean, I worked with 91 directors on that show alone. 91.
It's wild.
I made lifelong relationships. I learned so much about the filmmaking process, and I had fun. And it was like my academy of acting and like exploring and taking risks. And I had so much fun doing it.
Very wise of Todd Haynes to be able to see you so perfectly in this role. Well, I think that is also a great place to end this. Charles, congrats again on everything. Thanks so much for your time. And I suspect and hope we are going to continue to see you out and about as this movie's journey continues over the next couple months. So thanks again.
Thank you so much.
Well, if you want to see Charles and Natalie Portman and Julianne Moore and Todd Haynes' incredible work on May, December, you can do so right now. The movie is streaming on Netflix. And that is it for this week's episode of The Awardist. If you like what you're watching here, be sure to subscribe to Entertainment Weekly on YouTube. You can also catch our Awardist podcast wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. And to keep the conversation with us going, follow Entertainment Weekly on all socials. We're at EW on X, formerly known as Twitter, and at Entertainment Weekly everywhere else. You can also tag me at Jared Hall.